Hello, everybody, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending where you are in the world today. And wherever you are around the globe, I hope everyone is keeping safe and well under current circumstances. I'd like to now take some time to talk with you about the importance of working with your CMO during product development, how the CMO can help you, can assist you, and really facilitate that development process to make sure your test gets to market when you want it to get there and at a cost and budget that is in line with your expectations. So before I dive into that detail, I would just like to take a couple of moments just to give you an introduction really as to who and where we are and what we do, essentially. So I guess everybody would agree that 2020 has been a relatively challenging year so far, and there have been, I guess, significant changes for everyone around the world. There have been a number of changes within Abingdon Health. I mean, since the beginning of 2020, where we are now, it's almost a completely different company in terms of what we have facility-wise. So just to give you a quick sort of rundown regarding that. So beginning of this year, we had the one manufacturing site where we also had R&D, tech transfer, sales and marketing, finance, essentially our headquarters. And that was at the York Biotech campus, a few miles outside the historic city of York in the UK, and it's a biosecure site. We had been there for a number of years. Now, one of the challenges that 2020 threw at us was a requirement to significantly ramp up our production capacity, to meet the demand for tests relating to the global pandemic, but also to keep in line with our customers' business growth. So to that end, there's been significant investment at Abingdon. So we now have a second manufacturing site, which is based in Doncaster in the UK, and we still have a satellite R&D facility based in the West Midlands. That expansion hasn't just been, if you like, for the manufacturing footprint and the actual sort of square meterage. There have also been significant investment in terms of people and the required equipment. So if you have been involved with the lateral flow world previously, or something that you were now researching, you would have already heard brand names such as Biodot, Genolis, Kinematic, etc. So we've invested heavily in new Biodot reel-to-reel reagent dispensing equipment, auto laminators, and we will have multiple Genolis systems live before the end of the year, which are very much the cutting edge, really, in that sort of final assembly piece when assembling the lateral flow assay device. Because of the nature of the business we're involved with, as you would imagine, our sites meet all quality standards and certifications required, and we've basically grown since 2008 by acquiring complementary diagnostic businesses, not only to strengthen our position within this particular market, but also really to enhance the offering that is open to our customers, be it for contract development and then manufacturing, or pure contract manufacturing. In terms of what we do, as I previously mentioned, there is a choice. Flexibility is key, basically. So we have a global client base, UK, Europe, North America, Far East, and we essentially are a contract manufacturing organization specializing in rapid tests, specifically lateral flow assays. We also have a contract development component to that. So we can be involved, if you like, directly in the development from start to finish, then transfer to manufacturing, or it can be pure contract manufacturing after the test has been developed elsewhere. However, regardless of at what point we're involved and what we are responsible for, we always have the same core focus. So we're relatively unique within the market in that we have developed and manufacture some of our own Abingdon Health branded tests, and the quality management system, processes, procedures that we would apply to our own developments and own manufacturing is something that we apply to our customers also. So that core focus is very much high quality, robust, manufacturable test, and that's something that we will touch upon a little later. But it's something which really cannot be stressed enough. The best test in the world could be developed. Every bell and whistle you could possibly hope for, but actually when you come to manufacture that test, if that consideration hasn't been there from very early on, you may find that it just simply cannot be manufactured for a reasonable cost that is going to enable you to hit your market pricing, and obviously can have a major negative impact on the performance of that test within the market and your business plans. So we very much focus on robust, high quality, manufacturable tests. Everyone can think challenges and issues that present themselves during development are unique to that development, but we've been involved in this field for long enough time and across multiple different industry sectors, to know that there isn't much that can be that can now challenge us that we haven't seen previously, and we would have something in our sort of metaphorical toolbox that could be used. So in terms of the different industries, we have developed and we manufacture tests for human health, animal and veterinary, agricultural, environmental, food safety, infectious disease, and environmental diagnostics. So each of those different types of tests can have different challenges in terms of how the sample matrix may be collected, may be processed, how the sample matrix will impact perhaps the biological reagents, etc. So any good CMO worth its salt, will have a strong pedigree in terms of manufacturing a wide variety of tests, and they may have a history of test development also. So there is potentially a great source of information and assistance as you move through your own particular development. Over recent years, we have developed the APDX technology also. So, and that was simply a response to the requirement from our customer base to perhaps move away from benchtop-based lateral flow readers more to a sort of smartphone-based system. So that's something that we've been involved with for a number of years, and really how that APDX looks and is customized for your particular test or a particular test is very much up to your requirements and what you want the end user to see and how you want them to use that smartphone reader. So you can build in things such as test choreography, timers, barcode readers, etc., or have something that simply takes the result, displays it to the user, and stores it within the phone memory. And the other end of the scale, having cloud connectivity, and then that data being accessible by via a secure portal by, for example, a clinician to assess the progression of a particular disease state or things of that nature. So I hope I've just given a quick sort of introduction as to why I'm basically here today. I personally have been involved with the lateral flow field for probably coming up to 8 years now, I believe. And although I do have a background in science, I was a humble microbiologist for many years before venturing into biotech and R&D and rapid test development. It's been a good 20 years since I last worked within a laboratory. So you will be pleased to know our R&D director has told me on numerous times that I will never set foot into one of her laboratories. So you can rest assured the transfer to manufacturing, if needed, is done with a safe pair of hands, and you don't get me involved at the same time. So, but why outsource lateral flow assay production? There's a number of different areas to consider, really. So there's a financial benefit. So, for example, if lateral flow assay production is not your core business, by outsourcing that manufacturing, you're then removing the requirement for quite significant, quite heavy capital expenditure. That budget may be then used for other purposes, perhaps revenue generating projects. And of course, it isn't enough just to have the equipment. We know from experience, you can have the best equipment in the world, but you've really got to invest in your people also. Although much of lateral flow assay production, can be as automated as possible, you still need operators and production staff of a high skill level, many with a scientific background, to be able to manufacture those tests to meet the specification agreed prior to the whole thing transferring in. So by outsourcing, you're taking away that people cost also. Obviously, if lateral flow assay production isn't your core business, then by outsourcing the manufacturing, you can then focus on your core business, aligning those activities with high priority projects, for example, and really enabling your workforce, your colleagues, to do what they do best. So if that is R&D, then crack on with the R&D. Don't worry about the manufacturing. Outsource it to a company that is tried and tested and trusted within the business. There's very much that element of future-proofing the business. So for example, within any manufacturing agreement, there will be agreed quality criteria, quality specifications, QC testing, agreed lead time, delivery times, etc. So when the order is placed for the required number of tests, they're going to be delivered by the agreed delivery date, and there's no issue or challenge for you in the future by losing key personnel involved in the manufacture of those tests if you're doing them in-house, and how that could impact the business. So by outsourcing business, you outsource the risk, essentially, which is something that a number of people have taken advantage of over the years, because it really is, it can really be a very positive impact on your future business activity. Of course, flexing the operation in line with demand. So whenever tests transfer in, there will be a routine manufacturing batch size, but essentially you only need to purchase what you want in line with your sales forecast. And if any CMO is worth doing business with, then they will already have supply agreements with major materials manufacturers. So you can really then implement a fixed cost management process. There should not be any unexpected spikes in terms of materials cost. If your CMO has those agreements in place, has the relationships there, and can then manage that process for you. Again, really, this is all about, outsourcing risk again, and really, why reinvent the wheel? So by using a good CMO, they will already have the equipment in place. I mean, here you've got a couple of images of the Genolis system. They will have established processes. They will be certified, with various regulatory bodies to. They've already got the people there. So you've got the equipment, you've got the people, and you've got the processes all already in place. No need for you to spend money, spend time to put those into your facility. So it takes away any time associated with ordering equipment, because for the best will in the world, sometimes a bottleneck can be equipment lead time. So take away that. And of course, any spikes in demand, can be quite easily handled by your CMO, as long as you've done the due diligence side of things. You've chosen a CMO which has the capability to really respond to pressures the market may exert on you, perhaps in terms of increase in batch size, increase in the number of batches needed over a relatively short space of time. So the CMO has to have that sort of capability, that footprint necessary to, if need be, increase production to meet your requirements. How can a CMO assist you otherwise? Well, use a CMO to become more competitive. To do that, you want stable long-term pricing. So as I said previously, your CMO should have a robust, strong supply chain in place, and can make use of that existing supply chain and logistical processes in place to make sure that you've got that long-term manufacturing cost. You're not going to be experience unexpected spikes in terms of cost, and it allows you to plan properly, and also allows your CMO to plan, and really enhances which the partnership, which it really should be. Something I'll talk about a little bit later, is that a CMO shouldn't just be a manufacturing site. The CMO should really be your eyes and ears within the marketplace. So there may be regulatory support required, which there certainly has been for a number of companies recently with the changes to European regulation. Now, there may be logistical support. So rather than the CMO expecting you to supply all the raw materials, the biologicals, the componentry, and they manufacture and then ship back to you to ship on to the customer, there may be a requirement, simply because of available space within your facility, that actually the CMO will handle the supply chain, the logistics for all of the components of your test, and there may even be areas in terms of commercial activity that your CMO could assist you with. Perhaps accessing different markets through existing distribution and channel sales networks the CMO already has, etc. And I guess the last area I would touch upon really is, it's about that outsourcing the risk. It's the support and reassurance. So you will obviously have within a CMO a dedicated project team that may handle the transfer of your test into routine manufacturing, but you would have a dedicated account manager. There would be points of contact within quality, QC, QA, operations, and those regular routine calls, business reviews, etc., can make sure that your CMO activity is aligned fully with your business goals, which has been, which really can't be emphasized and stressed enough during the current situation with the global pandemic. There's had to have been a much greater cooperation and contact between customers and CMO to make sure that those tests are delivered where they're needed to the right people. So I think we sort of covered why there may be a requirement to outsource lateral flow assay production and some of the benefits outsourcing the production can give. But I guess we should talk about, well, when should the CMO be involved? Now, from my perspective and from my personal opinion, I would say as early as possible. There has to be that focus in development from a very, very early stage, how that test is going to be manufactured, how that test, the R&D scale, those sort of bench scale production, how is that going to be scaled up? Materials, processes, equipment all need to be considered at a very, very early stage. And so otherwise, you're simply not going to achieve high throughput production and the capability to produce routinely high quality, robust tests to meet your desired timeline or to get into the market, to get a foot in the door, essentially, versus your competition. Now, how can the CMO assist you? Well, at those early stages, there may not be any direct experimental work that the CMO would assist you with, but there is that advisory capacity. Again, you don't want to reinvent the wheel. So working with a CMO from the start of a development can significantly reduce risk. I really can't stress enough that what can work in R&D may not translate onto the large automated lateral flow manufacturing equipment. So, for example, the materials you initially choose for the R&D work may be perfectly fine in terms of flow rate for the sample to move through the test. You may see a nice positive line, and when you get to that point within a development, if you're developing a sandwich assay, but the worst case scenario is that material, perhaps that nitrocellulose membrane, the material that you've chosen, it simply lacks the tensile strength that it can't be used on a reel-to-reel automated system. And again, having to change something at a late stage in development or as you're transferring to manufacturing is going to be costly in terms of money and time. So, I do urge everyone listening to really consider using a CMO to save you time and money, and don't reinvent the wheel. The CMO will have advice, will know the best options in terms of that sample matrix, that type of test that you want to develop and manufacture, and as an advisory role, can really make a positive impact. So this diagram really illustrates some of the typical stages, if you like, during a development pathway for a lateral flow assay. So where in that pathway, should you involve a CMO? Well, ultimately, it's your choice. Talking from personal experience from an Abingdon Health perspective, as a CMO, we can be involved right at the beginning. So if a customer, for example, decides to outsource not just the manufacturing, but if it's if lateral flow is non-core to the R&D team, they may decide to outsource some of that risk of the development and outsource the R&D to us also. So, and obviously that's going to, if that's possible, it's going to depend whether your CMO of choice is purely manufacturing or also has a development capability also. So, for example, as I said, in some cases, we can be involved from the very early stage, proof of concept, and we operate a system here, which is, I think, is common to many companies within the rapid testing sector. Essentially, it's a very modular approach with feasibility to optimization to scale up to technical transfer. So, where your test may fit into our pathway, will be dictated by how much work, how much R&D has obviously been done prior to it coming into us as a contract manufacturing organization. So typically, if a test has been developed, it may be developed up to the end of optimization, and it's then time to scale up and then transfer for routine manufacturing. So that's a very common approach. That scale up is basically necessary. So, for example, within R&D, you may have been manufacturing tests on a very sort of bench scale, benchtop process, and perhaps there's been no testing of that initial of that design on common biodot reel-to-reel system, in terms of dispensing reagent, in terms of the autolaminator, etc. So that scale-up process is very important to make sure that what's being done at an R&D scale can be scaled up effectively onto the manufacturing equipment, and it's from there then move into the technical transfer and then ultimately routine manufacturing. But again, this is something that your CMO should be aware of. And really, it's your choice, but your CMO should be prepared, to be involved at those earlier stages, even if it is from an advisory perspective, just to make sure, as we said previously, that the materials that you're looking at, the processes that you're considering to manufacture, are all suitable for high throughput routine manufacturing. So if we took that a little bit further and look at it in a bit more depth, really. So where should you involve the CMO? Well, one thing for me is materials. So you could look at it as what does successful manufacturing involve, from a lateral flow assay. Well, you conjugate your labels on your antibodies effectively. Those labels could be gold nanoparticles. The gold could be spherical. It could be nanorods. Could be looking at cellulose beads. Could be looking at fluorescent particles, platinum, carbon. There's latex. There's a whole host of particles out there. Obviously, you want the best particle for your particular test. So you conjugate the labels to the antibodies effectively. You select and apply the right reagents, in terms perhaps of surfactants, things of those nature, and components. So nitrocellulose membrane, you want your sample pad, your conjugate pad, your upper wick. You assemble all that into a housing. Make sure they all work together, to deliver tests according to your quality specifications. I mean, sounds easy, doesn't it? But I think we all know that in each choice, in each element within those multiple working parts of a lateral flow assay, if you don't get that particular component right, there will be a knock-on. There will be a knock-on effect. If the issue with that component carries on through development, you may come to the point where you want to transfer it to manufacturing, and your CMO may point out immediately, look, we've used that particular material in the past. We know it causes problems X, Y, and Z. Now, you then have a choice. The test could be manufactured as is with that element, and really, accepting that element of risk of that particular component, or there's that choice there to spend time, money swap that component out. So again, having the CMO involved, at a relatively early stage, you can make use of the CMO's experience, and really there's no need then, as I've said previously, and forgive me if I repeat this numerous times, no need to reinvent the wheel. If your CMO that you've chosen has the experience and the expertise when it comes not only to manufacturing tests but also what's developing tests, and they will be able to assist you with all of these areas that really should be considered. So for example, as you can imagine, there's a huge variety of different sample matrices, depending on what the test is going to analyze and who the end user is going to be. So if a test is being developed and it's whole milk, there's that high fat content to consider. If it's whole blood, you want to strip out the red blood cells, so they could potentially mask the red test line if it was in gold. There's a whole host of things to consider. I mean, saliva. The number of times I've been in a meeting and we're talking about the development and plus manufacturing of a saliva matrix-based test, and people will always sort of agree with that sort of wry smile. Yes, you think saliva should be an easy sample matrix because it's 98% water. It's the other 2% that causes all of the challenges really to overcome. So, what are the best materials to allow high throughput automated production? Because if you plan on supplying into your market, 100, 200, 500,000 tests a month, you don't want those made by hand. You want it to be as automated as possible to drive down the manufacturing costs, and to take away as much potential human error as possible. Now, in terms of those materials, does your CMO of choice have long-term supply agreements? Now, this has become an important factor really during this year, because there has been such a demand from a wide variety of companies to develop a COVID-19 test. So, luckily, we've been in this game long enough that we have very good relationships, with nitrocellulose membrane suppliers, suppliers of sample pads, upper wicks, backing card, etc. That we already have those agreements in place, and we can work with our vendors to assist us if our demand increases. Now, I certainly wouldn't want to be in a position this year of suddenly going out to the market looking for a supply for nitrocellulose membrane when there was a huge demand for that particular material. So there may have been stock issues. The other thing to bear in mind in terms of your CMO having a robust supply chain, not only that, no risk to the continuity of supply, but for example, any required changes in material, perhaps if things have been discontinued, so you need a CMO to have that relationship with the supplier to be able to manage those component changes, and really to be your eyes and ears within the market, to know if there's something that's approaching on the horizon and it could impact, the material you need to produce your test. Then having that relationship, having that knowledge beforehand, can go a long way to minimize any negative impact. And again, I know something that I mentioned previously, but just having that experience, having that expertise to know, well, are those components that have been selected, are they suitable for automated manufacturing? So again, where should you involve your chosen CMO? Well, a good CMO will not only have experience and expertise, but they'll also have those processes in place. So using your CMO at a relatively early stage, prior to a test transferring in, will ensure that the assay that's being developed can be transferred in efficiently and within a really optimized time frame. So to get that test into routine manufacturing, get that test out to your customers. Again, you don't want to be reinventing the wheel. You want to use those sort of tried and tested processes and procedures that, as I mentioned previously, whereas in Abingdon, the same procedures and processes we use for our Abingdon Health branded products are those that are applied to our contract manufacturing tests. And it's going to mean that those critical process parameters and control points associated with the process, with the equipment, are already going to be defined. And that process is going to provide a reproducible and robust manufacturing, process. The last thing you want is to have errors, quality problems, batch after batch after batch. I mean, that just should not be the situation whatsoever. So by involving your CMO at an early point within the product development, keeping those touch points as the development proceeds, you really are going to use and really are going to make use of your CMO's expertise, experience, and their existing automation, their existing equipment. Again, reducing the requirement for you to spend time and money putting these things in place. I'm sure you're aware lateral flow immunoassays or lateral flow assay tests can be manufactured by hand, but for routine manufacturing, you really want that to be automated as much as possible. By working with a CMO at an early point, you're going to know, you're going to have that input from a CMO regarding, well, in terms of a test design, what is suitable for automation, what is not. So things that would need to be considered, as you can imagine, the equipment to be employed to manufacture, the R&D batches, perhaps in-house. How does that equipment compare, to the manufacturing equipment your CMO will use? So, as I mentioned, how does your equipment compare to, for example, the Biodot reel-to-reel reagent dispensers, autolamination equipment, things of that nature? And ultimately, how translatable is your R&D production to routine production within the CMO? Okay, so again, having those conversations, having input from a CMO at the particular points through the development, you're really gonna, all that prep work is going to be done. So what you want from a CMO then is an efficient, fast, optimized transfer to manufacturing. Okay, nobody likes any surprises, essentially. I mentioned technical transfer a number of times. I mean, in many cases, this is actually where we would anticipate seeing tests that that may have been developed elsewhere, may already be commercially available, and there's a requirement to transfer them into a CMO. So it's basically a process where you verify that routine manufacturing process is suitable, and it can really be sort of split into two areas. I'm sure that you're aware of this in terms of batch manufacturing. So accurate, reproducible, and robust assay that allows repeatable batches to be produced to meet the quality criteria. So typically, we would kind of sort of manufacturing three transfer batches. There's also that documentation element to it, and obviously to make batch records are complete, which can go into the necessary technical dossiers, perhaps used for regulatory purposes. And I think a key element is that obviously your CMO has to take the lead with regard to this process. it's in the CMO's interest to move that test into routine routine manufacturing, and I can't think of any CMO that would want to purposely extend that technical transfer process, but a good CMO will also resist the temptation to cut corners, because you really have to demonstrate repeatable production of batches in terms of quality, in terms of not only the product, but also the repeatability and robustness of the process in place, and cutting any corners is just a recipe for disaster further on down the line. So I would urge everyone to really, as the slide suggests, to take the lead from the CMO with regard to what's required for technical transfer. So I think you've probably heard me say this a number of times, but if you can, talk to or even if you haven't thought about manufacturing your assay, yet, speak to companies involved in this field, even if it's primarily for advisory input. It's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth your while. By working with that CMO, and having that CMO in place, ready to accept the test post-development for manufacturing, is really, really going to assist in that development process. And really make sure the quality management system that the CMO is working to is suitable. However, the one thing I would always suggest people to research before choosing a CMO, is what do they offer except manufacturing? The CMO should be your, at least your eyes and ears within the market. So in terms of helping you through that sort of regulatory and commercial landscape. So what regulatory support is there now? You may find a company can develop a lateral flow assay. It can manufacture a lateral flow assay up to a certain batch size. Company may develop the tests, may manufacture, and up to the batch size, 500,000 tests plus. You may find other companies that purely all they do is contract manufacturing. Now, the question you also have to ask is, how can you support me in terms of that commercial and regulatory landscape? Now, something I think we're very fortunate within Abingdon is because we've developed and manufactured our own tests, and we have had to make that investment in terms of a very strong QA and RA department. So we can support our customers in terms of current and future regulation, whether that be sort of FDA sort of 510K, that obviously should be. Extra marks if anyone noticed that before me. CE marking, and the imminent implementation of IVDI. So as you know, I think it's by the 26th of May 2022, all IVDs sold in the EU don't need to adhere to the new IVD I think it's 2017/746. So which replaces the original IVDD. Now, it's thought that this will impact 80% of IVDs actually sold within the EU. And so your CMO should already, have been very much not only aware of what's coming down the road, but working with their customers to assist them in what needs to be done, what changes need to be done, really to get those tests market ready. Now, your CMO may also have the capability, to be able to undertake a legal manufacturer status on your behalf, So, but there's those other areas that the CMO can assist also, you know, so packaging solutions, you know, it at some points actually getting the test device assembled into a foil pouch with a desiccant label is maybe, you know, almost the easiest part of that process. You know, you've then, well, what about all the peripheral components, etc. You know, so perhaps you use your CMO within the development process to advise and assist on, well, what's going to be the optimal sample collection method, sample treatment, what componentry would be required, what are those sort of commercial aspects, you know, that need to be considered. So potential distribution channels, you know, even supporting you within commercial negotiation. And so there's a whole variety of aspects where the CMO, your chosen CMO should be able to assist you with, you know, and be much more than just a manufacturer. So I would just like to take a couple of minutes just to really give you a bit of a sort of case study here, which really shows all areas how a CMO can assist you. So this relates to the ABC19 rapid test. So this is something that we undertook as part of the UK Rapid Test Consortium, taking on the lead manufacturer status. So we were involved from a very early stage in that developing the test, you know, which was really done at an exceptional timeline in terms of that development process, you know, and you know, you could argue the point, well, if it can be done for this test, it could be done for other tests, but this was really a sort of valiant effort from colleagues within R&D and tech transfer, you know, sort of working around the clock, split shifts, and really applying as much resource as was needed to get this important test developed. You know, so it's essentially an antibody test looking at IgG, you know, for use through the population, you know, whole blood finger prick test. Now, this is an area where we've been involved, as I said, in the development. We have with other consortium members, we've been manufacturing the test, but we've also been pivotal in terms of the regulatory aspects. So really taking on all of those necessary workflow requirements to facilitate this test being developed, manufactured, and out into the market, where, you know, it's a very important test that is needed to respond to current events. So I guess all I can do is thank you for your attention. I hope you found this interesting and informative. I look forward to any questions, and thank you for your attention.
Jonathan, thank you for that outstanding presentation. We will now move into the live Q&A portion of our presentation. So now, as a reminder to our audience, please submit your questions via the Q&A box. Okay. Jonathan, our first question. If you had to give someone one piece of advice about developing a test for manufacturing, what would it be?
I think the best piece of advice I could possibly give would be don't cut corners. There will always be the option from some development companies, some manufacturing companies, or even an internal pressure, you know, to really speed things along, you know, because ultimately to get the test out into the marketplace to start generating revenue. But often that can be, you know, a recipe for a disaster, essentially. And so any development pathway, there will be elements of that development which can run in parallel if if sufficient technical resource is available. But wherever there's the temptation, to perhaps actually, we just live with the potential risk of not doing X, Y, and Z in the development, and then we do them at the end if need be. That can just, it is just kicking the can down the road, and there could be a whole host of unwelcome surprises when you are ready to transfer it into manufacturing that have to be remedied at that point.
Sure, thank you. What size batches should be produced when a test is transferred into manufacturing?
The one thing to bear in mind, just to give you the sort of Abingdon Health approach. So we would manufacture 3 validation or 3 transfer batches. Now, we tend to take the approach of sort of low medium, which is probably not the right words to use really, but the one thing that should always be the goal is that 3rd and final validation batch should be at the anticipated routine production batch size. So that will be based on the customer's initial sales forecast. The reason being, you want to demonstrate that test can be manufactured in a repeatable way, but it can be manufactured at the scale it is going to be done on a routine basis. So you don't want to transfer a test into manufacturing, say for 10,000, a batch size of 10,000 tests, and then within a couple of months, there's the realization that the test is taken off in the market, and actually 100,000 tests are needed per batch. And there's a whole host of things to look at then in terms of conjugate stability, QC procedures, etc. And there can be an element of work then to scale up to the required routine batch size. So low, medium, high, but that sort of high, if you like, is the routine batch size.
Thank you for that answer. Now we have some great questions coming in, so I want to make sure we have time to answer them. Let's go with this next one. Great job, John. Given the current pandemic, there seems to be a lack of CMO capacity globally. Does Abingdon Health have capacity to take on new projects?
Yeah, I mean, it can be a challenge. It can certainly depend on current production schedules, etc. I mean, we're very conscious that we have customers that have been with Abingdon before the pandemic and will be with us after the pandemic. So we certainly have made sure that those customers have been prioritized to maintain that continuity of supply. But I mean, it's one of the reasons why our CEO Chris Heath took the sort of decision really to make sure we invest in the infrastructure in terms of manufacturing capacity, equipment footprint. So I think by the end of this year, we should be up to 1 million tests a week capacity. And there'll be, I think there's another expansion planned for next year to take that further. So there is capacity available. I mean, it is in high demand, but we are approaching it, with a sort of cool head and in a very methodical manner, really. So to make sure that the orders are in, customers are fully aware. It's very transparent as to what the lead time is going to be, and we've been looking at modifying sort of work plans, etc. So not just bringing in extra equipment, but we've also greatly increased the workforce within those areas to make sure the capacity is there.
That's great to hear. Good. Our next question. Let's see. So many great questions. Are you able to help new startup with guidance on how to obtain grants funding in order to help them get through the development process? For example, with Gates Foundation submissions.
Yes. I mean, we can, we have a long history with a wide variety of companies, from startups, spin-outs from universities, through to multinationals. So yeah, I mean, if that person, if I can respond to them directly with my contact details, and yeah, we can certainly have a chat, and if I can advise them, or a colleague can, we certainly will.
Great. And we do have all of everyone's email addresses for those who are submitting questions. So any questions we are unable to answer today, and any of the questions that come in during the on-demand period, you will be able to answer those via email. So we have time for just maybe 2 more. So let's squeeze a couple in here. Does Abingdon do microfluidic cartridges too? And would you have a recommended CMO for microfluidics?
We don't currently. Again, I'll take that offline and speak with some colleagues. And there may be some companies that we can suggest. We're very sort of collaborative within the industry, and there's lots of possible connections there that we can call upon. So yeah, I'll reply to that person, and if we can help or if we can put information, I certainly will.
Great. And let's go with this question, because it seems like a very popular topic in 2020 right now, obviously. Currently, are you still being approached to develop tests that are non-COVID related? Absolutely,
yes. And I must confess, when we are, it's an absolute breath of fresh air. It seems to have been, everything's been COVID related since, it seems, all year, doesn't it? So yes, I mean, there are still tests being developed out there which have nothing to do with COVID-19, and we have one who recently started, and and there's a couple more due to start shortly. So yeah, it's still going on.
Great. And Jonathan, we have time for one more question, so let's wrap with this one. If customers wish to transfer their design into you for manufacture, do you have a preferred suppliers you'd prefer to work with for reagents, pads, membranes, etc., or are you open in your approach to whatever works best in the development?
Yeah, so a term we often use is we are, in theory, particle materials agnostic. So it's very much a case of looking what has been used, perhaps, to develop in the test development before it comes into Abingdon. We have very strong relationships with all of the main suppliers, not just for the sort of usual sort of suspects in terms of reagents, materials, but also housings, etc. So we would very much be focused on what's best for the test, what's best to deliver a test which meets those initial sort of test specifications. It's going to deliver a test which meets the end user requirements. But we certainly wouldn't be looking to crowbar in a particular material into that test. We don't actually manufacture sort of nanoparticles ourselves, and so we're very much open to what's the best material to fit that test specification, and what's been done previously. If it can be improved, if there is something that we know of, we certainly will discuss that with the customer, and and a decision can then be made. But we certainly wouldn't be looking to change things for the sake of it.
Great. And Jonathan, okay. Unfortunately, we're out of time. We had so many great questions coming in. There's quite a few that we weren't able to answer. But do you have any final comments for our audience?
I mean, I think we're going to, I think a lot more people are now aware of lateral flow assays. There's probably been a mix in the media of sort of good reviews, bad reviews, you know, based on current sort of world events. And I think, you know, where there may be negative press, I mean, I think that's primarily down to corners being cut, things not being thought through completely, and, you know, and tests being rushed out onto the marketplace. So it's an assay type which is going to be with us again for, you know, for decades, as it has been previously. And I think, you know, for the industry, you know, there's certainly a challenging but also exciting few years ahead of us.
Sure, that makes sense. So, Jonathan, thank you so much. We so appreciate your time. I want to remind, thank you. And I do want to remind our audience that those questions that we did not answer and any of those that are submitted during the on-demand period, they will be addressed via email. So this presentation will be available for on-demand viewing. I just want to remind you to share it with your colleagues who might be interested in today's topic. And don't miss out on other presentations on our agenda. Thank you again for participating, and we hope you have a great day. Thanks for joining us.